Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Photoshop by Eduonix. In this lecture we're going to be going over the type tool. And first let's just take a look at installing fonts. At least there's point type, that's when you have the type tool. And you just click. As you can see there's a point right here. The thing about point type is that it doesn't conform to a shape. If I wanted to fill this white rectangle up, a point type wouldn't be the way to do it, because while I can put in, use Shift Enter to do a line break, or just enter, what happens if we want to make this bigger? It's going to go outside of the boundaries. Or anything, if we want to just change the formatting, or if this is a lot more type. So instead of doing that, we can use a box. And when you have the type tool in a vector shape, you notice when you move over it, it turns into a circle. Also, when you move over the line, it turns into a little swivelly line. Let's look at the circle. This is called area type. So as you can see, what I typed out here, it conforms to the boundaries of the shape you clicked on. As you can see, when we go back to the vector tool, we can edit this square again. If you're using CC, then you can edit it very similar to how you do it in Illustrator. And this is good, better than point type, because you can change the orientation and use type as a shape. Let's go back into the text tool. So let's just take a look at, up here we have the control panel, or the options. I think it's actually, it's called options in Photoshop. And it's a little preview of whatever tool you're using. We're using the type tool. So we have some options up here. Toggle text orientation will change it from horizontal, as it is right now, to vertical. And as you can see, vertical has its own rules, just like horizontal does. This will change the font. You can use your mouse wheel on any of these with a value. And obviously you can also click them. And next to the font you'll see whether it's a true type or it's an open type font, and that's with the little O. And open type fonts typically have a lot more characters, and true type fonts our vector as just the basic font requirements, and sometimes they don't have that next to them. A lot of times that means they're raster font. So typically when you're looking for fonts, you want to look for true type or open type, and that's TTF or OTF respectively. Also, there's a type of font called extended, which tends to have a lot of different glyphs, which a glyph is just a character. To the right of the font box, we have the font face, regular, italic, bold, bold italic. There's also condensed, light, thin. Those are both light and thinner, less than regular, they're thinner. And black is typically the thickest that you'll get. But that's what that is. And then you have the font size. Now if I use my mouse wheel, it'll go up by 1. And if I hold in shift, it'll go up by 10 and down by 10, depending on how I scroll my mouse wheel. And then you can also just see the preset ones right here. You can type in a value. So anti-aliasing or aliasing, I think it's aliasing, I'm not sure. But it's right here. You have an option of sharp, crisp, strong, and smooth. And just cycling through these, you can see what it does, basically what it sounds like. And then Windows, LCD, and Windows. I'm not really too sure what those do, but I suppose it's for a Windows LCD screen, and like a generic Windows anti-aliasing. But default set to none, or it's set to one of these. I think strong maybe. And it changes the pixels on the outside, the fringe of the letters, and how they blend into the transparent space around the letters. So if you're getting pixelated looking type, you can try this. And of course try saving your file a little bit bigger. We have create warp text, which is relatively new over here. And it basically takes the warping options from Illustrator. And you can get some pretty cool effects here. And keep in mind this is still while it's in text mode, which is the advantage. And all the way over on the right we have the toggle character and paragraph panels, which is just a nice shortcut to bring up the character and the paragraph panels. So in the character panel you have a lot of options. To start out with, we have our font size. And right over here we have the leading. If I select all my lines, I can make this basically, you can see what it does here. And then if you just select one line, you can change that line's leading. And it's basically the distance from whatever you have selected to the next thing above it. And right here we have our kerning, which a lot of times you'll get an error if you try to use this. You'll only be able to set it to 0 or metrics or optical. But kerning is the distance between characters and the actual physical distance. Right here, which is kind of the equivalent of kerning, but it's tracking, and that sets also the distance between characters. So play around with these bottom two to get a real feel for the difference between them. We have horizontal stretching and vertical stretching. If we just take one character like this S, we'll change the horizontal stretching. Oops, You can see what that does pretty clearly. So they're set to 100% by default. And as you can see, it doesn't affect the kerning or it doesn't affect the tracking. Then we have the baseline shift, which is good if you're using like a registered trademark symbol and you don't have the superscript feature. It basically does the same thing as superscript or subscript, but it lets you specifically choose where to put the letter. Comes in handy. And then the color, which is also editable right here. So down here we have a number of options, and these are Photoshop's own. You'll see it says faux italic, which means it's applying its own italic to this. It's not the preset italic, which is right here. You'll see a very slight difference between the two. I prefer to actually use the faux italic options. And here we have all caps, small caps. Not sure it'll show me anything because I typed this out in caps. See, now I'm typing in all caps, but I was typing in regular case. So if I just went unselected that, you see how I originally typed it. And this is good because you don't have to actually edit the font or the type itself. And then small caps is just what it sounds like, tiny caps. And then we have superscript and subscript. Superscript will make it smaller and put it a little bit above, is for exponents and things like that. And then you have subscript for equations and exponents, registered marks. You have underline, strike through, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Now over here you have ligatures, and for example I'm using Arial, which is an extended. A lot of times you won't see these, but discretionary, contextual, you'll have to look up all these individual definitions, but basically if this is the little examples in the thumbnails, FI means it'll put like the F and the I next to each other. They'll kind of be connected if the font is built like that. And we're talking mostly about extended fonts and pretty much exclusively about OpenType. And right here, for example, it'll change a letter depending on what's next to it. That's what I guess discretionary means. And it'll change letters depending on what letter's next to it. If it's two letters in a row, there's stylistic alternates, which is actually pretty rare. I wish it wasn't, but you see there's two different kinds of A's right here. There's a small and there's a standard typewriter style A, and then there's like the handwritten kind, and there's all different kinds of things. And by selecting these, it'll add additional styles, and sometimes you'll have a whole paragraph of text and just selecting one won't do anything. And it really depends on how the font's built. But you can, if you look up fonts with ligatures, you'll get a lot of cool effects and stuff. And then we have, I believe this is Anti-Aliasing down here too. And it looks like this preset is smooth. So that's an overview of the character and the type tool. I use this the most, obviously. I use this about second, and then this. Hardly ever use kerning. And then I don't really use horizontal and vertical tracking or stretch. If you go in here, you'll see a lot more options that are basically what was over here. Change text orientation is, of course, this. And you can see no matter what you have selected, changing the text orientation will do the whole body of text. So let's just take one last quick look at the last main type tool, and we'll do it with a circle. Let's say. and that is the type on a path tool. When you put the type cursor right on top of the path, you'll see that little symbol come up. Now, depending on where I click, is where it'll start the type out. So I'm just going to type something real quick here. Now you see when I'm holding in Control or Command on a Mac, I have this little icon pops up, and I can drag this and change the orientation. This is really important, or you'll be banging your head against a wall. Also, the paragraph orientation up here, like whether it's center, or left justified, or whatever, that affects the type as well. So there you have a type on a path, and that's the main type tools. There's some more advanced options, and we'll get into those later. There's the type masking, which is good for, it's basically the same as if I made this into a text mask or a shape mask. And we can get into that a little bit later, but that's the gist of it. So play around with that and learn it, and thanks for watching.